Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of What Are Those Fish? My name is Calla Price.
And I'm Jordan Holmgren. We will be your hosts for today's episode. Today, Paul, who is an expert in the field of aquatic invasive species, will also be joining us for this podcast.
Hey guys, glad I can be a part of this week's episode.
As always, we will be taking some calls from 3 curious callers and will do our best to answer their questions throughout this episode. But for now, we would like to start by describing today's topic.
So, listeners, the region in which we live is largely impacted by bodies of fresh water, and people often use these resources for many different purposes, whether it is for water sports in the summer, leisure activities such as boating, swimming, or fishing. These freshwater bodies are great for people to use.
Not only do these bodies of fresh water have impacts on human lives, but they also are where many different species of plants and animals live.
This makes for an interesting problem when invasive species, like the common carp, move into our local waterways, right? First of all, what exactly is an invasive species, Paul?
Well guys, an invasive species is a species that is not native to the local ecosystem and whose introduction causes harm to different aspects of that ecosystem.
Thanks for clearing that up a bit, Paul. In today's episode, we will discuss a specific example of a study done on common carp by some Minnesota scientists. According to Daniel Zielinski and his associates, they have engineered a new method to deter these fish, and believe it or not, it actually worked.
This was an interesting study for our region because the numbers of common carp inhabiting our native waters have increased dramatically, even within the last few years alone, and the carp have negatively impacted many native aquatic species. The carp are particularly bad because they tend to increase turbidity or haziness of the water and kill off aquatic vegetation by uprooting plants and stirring up the bottom sediment. They also eat a lot of small organisms like zooplankton, which eat algae that in turn keeps the water more clear. All of this activity can eventually lead to the destruction of habitat and spawning grounds for native species of other fish, invertebrates, and waterfowl.
In this study, Zielinski and Sorensen tested to see if a bubble curtain, which is a device that emits bubbles of certain intensities into the stream, would create a physical barrier along with sound so it would deter the carp from migrating into or out of the lakes and spawning grounds. This is just one of the different ways that researchers are trying to manage movement of fish species through waterways.
Sounds like our first curious caller must have a couple questions for us.
Hi. Yeah, what's the big deal with all these ugly fish anyway? I mean, I love to go swimming and kayaking in the lakes around Roseville area in Minnesota, and I don't want to swim with them. They're so gross. Is anyone actually trying to keep them from moving into the lakes around here?
Well, actually, yes. The bubble curtain that Zielinski and his team designed was actually tested in Coleman Creek in Maplewood, Minnesota. If I'm correct, that's just a few minutes away from you. Just last year, their experiments involved adult carp and juvenile carp, and their movements into and out of little streams and lakes. This bubble curtain was essentially made from a few long PVC pipes placed at the bottom of the stream and large air pumps that force air through a system of air lines to make a large wall of bubbles underwater. The wall of bubbles spread across the distance of the creek from one side of the stream to the other and is meant to scare either the adult carp from entering the breeding spots or keep the juvenile carp from leaving the breeding spots. What they found was that even though the adult carp weren't really afraid of the curtain, the juvenile carp wouldn't swim through it. This means that we could potentially keep these little guys from reaching the lakes that you swim in.
Looks like we have another caller.
Yeah, hi there. I was wondering why scientists aren't just sticking to their normal management methods like electric barriers, dams, and gill nets. That's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that. The other methods like electric barriers, dams, and gill nets may be very effective at capturing a lot of unwanted fish, such as carp. However, they tend to be very expensive to make, run, and maintain. Besides being expensive, these other methods tend to often catch or even harm the native fish species that we, as conservationists, are trying to save.
All right, our third caller. What would you like to know?
Oh, hello. Yeah, I have a couple of boys that just love to go swimming around the lakes, and they also like to go bow fishing in the streams for the carp. I was concerned about their safety or that bubble thing you guys are talking about, and if my boys could get hurt if they ran into one.
Paul, would you like to take this one?
Sure. So another great feature of the bubble curtain is that it's completely safe. Your boys can swim and boat right over the top of the bubbles without getting hurt. We would recommend, though, that they try to stay away from it just so that they don't accidentally damage it.
Well, guys, that's our cue to wrap things up. Thank you to our callers for some great questions, and thank you, Paul, for being such a great and knowledgeable guest today. For everyone else out there listening, we challenge you to invent other ways to try to help manage the global concern of invasive species. It could be as simple as building traps in your garage to capture and turn in certain animals, or it could be as complex as designing an X-foot bubble curtain to be put under a stream. Just be sure to research safe equipment and methods or contact your local DNR. Either way, just be safe.
Oh, Calla, you're so corny. Or should I say fishy?